Chairman Brasso, thank you. Mr. Raby, when FLPMA was enacted, the BLM was directed to identify lands with wilderness characteristics. Congress has the opportunity to consider adding these lands to the National Wilderness Preservation System. Today, the BLM manages 487 wilderness study areas, totaling about 11.1 million acres. 37 of those 487 are in Montana. Until Congress decides what to do with the WSAs, the BLM continues to manage the area with the status in limbo indefinitely. That's study status. My question is, Mr. Raby, what are the long-term consequences for recreation, forest management, and even wildfire response of wilderness study areas not getting resolved?
Senator Daines, thank you very much for the question. And certainly having that wilderness study designation complicates multiple use management. And so it inherently limits our ability to carry out hazardous fuels reduction treatments. It can affect forest management activities. It can create limitations on recreation and access. So it creates a layer of complicating, management direction on areas that, as you noted previously, especially these ones in Montana that are before us in your proposed legislation, those were never found to be of suitable wilderness characteristics. Mm-hmm. And that's been since 1986. And so they do complicate management, multiple use management out there, and certainly the release would help uncomplicate that.
This isn't meant to be a trivial pursuit question, but do you remember who the president was in 1986?
Well, I believe that was Ronald Reagan.
It's Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
So it goes back to the Reagan presidency in terms of how long this has been in limbo and needs to be resolved. And we're talking about in this bill I have 100,000 acres of 11 million acres that are currently in limbo under the wilderness study area designations. Do you agree that Congress does need to move forward to finally resolve these 11 million acres currently in limbo to either put them in permanent wilderness or back to general management?
Senator, the short answer is yes.
Thank you. Deputy Chief French, the Forest Service determined the Middle Fork Judith Wilderness Study Area was identified as unsuitable for wilderness over 30 years ago. And that was reaffirmed again in the fall of 2021 after extensive public engagement. Could you briefly talk about what led to this determination and what public input there was in that process?
Yeah. Our forest planning process that looked at this a second time, the engagement occurred over the course of 6 years, many public meetings. I think there were over 100 organizations that commented. We had about 1,200 individual comment letters that came in. And again, for the second time, it was found that it didn't have the characteristics to remain as wilderness. And so, we did our part of what Congress asked us to do, but it sits there still kind of in this limbo after we did the assessment, and it mandates a management that isn't aligned with what the community told us it should be.
And I think that's important testimony, and thank you that there was a very public process with a lot of public input. And again, with these WSAs, when they're deemed suitable for wilderness, we should be looking at taking the next step to make them wilderness, but when they're deemed not suitable for wilderness, we should return them back to the general management status, which, as I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, still has multiple protections as it relates to the general management status. It's just they won't be managed as de facto wilderness as they are today. The Forest Service also manages 3 active grazing allotments that cover the majority of the WSA. Got a poster board here behind me. In 2019, the Forest Service reported to the Montana legislature that there's no mining and vegetative management, and the vegetative management is minimal, though the forest has recommended, and I quote, nearly 1 million board feet of harvest per year for fuels management and to help maintain early successional habitat for elk, unquote. My question is, could you confirm for this committee that this continues to be the recommendation and that releasing the Middle Fork Judith back to general management will benefit hazardous fuels reduction and wildlife habitat?
From my conversations back with the forest supervisor when they were doing this plan, generally I'd say yes. I haven't heard anything that would change that. You know, we are seeing a need to get in and actively manage these areas that have had fire excluded for as long as they have and have had no active management. I have not seen any change from that, so yes, generally I'd agree.
As we say out west in these dry, semi-arid climates, that either we are going to get in and proactively manage the forest or the forest starts to manage us, certainly through these catastrophic wildfires that we see as fire season is lengthened, temperatures have increased. How does the current designation affect the grazing allotments, and what happens if the WSA is returned to general management?
Well, I mean, I think the things to remember here is that it's being managed as wilderness right now. And what that does for us is it changes the way we can access things, the way that we can do improvements for our permittees that have range allotments in those places. It limits our ability for flexibility for increasing some of those allotments because wilderness requires you only to allow what was historically there when it was designated. And then it just limits our ability for active management in those areas. Even to, in some places, folks not wanting to see prescribed fire, although we can do it. So all of that is limited by the designation of which, again, at the request of Congress to see if it was even suitable for that designation, through a large public process, we determined no twice.
Mr. French, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks so very much to all of you. I appreciate all of your input and your testimony. It was very helpful for all of the members, and we're looking forward to moving these bills forward. So I appreciate your time. This hearing is adjourned.